Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. If you're new to my live streams, I have these regularly with the latest updates that I talk about. After that, I have the space open for the community for participation, as well as any questions that may come from the community as well. Tonight, I want to talk to you about multiple things that are interlinked. The first one is the statement that came from the new IDF Chief of Staff about 2021 being a year of war. The second thing, the delay of Benjamin Netanyahu going to Qatar or sending an Israeli delegation to Qatar to continue the negotiations on phase 2 when it comes to the ceasefire with Gaza. That being linked to his visit to the US. He arrived in the US. He's going to meet multiple senior figures inside the United States, including President Trump. But before that, he's going to meet Witkoff and several senior figures in the establishment too. What does that mean? Is Israel done with the ceasefire? Did they only get into the ceasefire to have an initial phase, get a few prisoners of war, and then go back with full force? Or something else happening? Why are those statements coming now from the new IDF Chief of Staff, some of his first statements? And how is that linked to the warning that's coming from the Israeli ambassador to the UN against Egypt, saying that Egypt has one purpose, war with Israel. Egypt is training for one purpose, which is war with Israel. We're going to start off with the statement that came from the new IDF Chief of Staff. He was the top figure in the office of the Defense Ministry in Israel, but in March he's officially going to be the new Israeli IDF Chief of Staff, saying that 2025 will continue to be a year of combat. He said interesting things in this article, including the fact that Israel will continue being in a state of war in 2025, that this war proved that we must rely on ourselves. Israel must defend itself with its own power, and the talks about us having to be independent are very accurate. We're going to start building more weapons, and we're going to start relying more and more on ourselves, and that we live in a neighborhood here, and he mentioned a few of his neighbors, right? He said, our neighbors from Iran to Gaza, from Yemen to Beirut to Damascus are wrong about us. Now, what's interesting is we know Iran and Gaza and we know Yemen and Beirut, but why Damascus? You, apparently the enemy, used to say that Al-Assad was the enemy of you. Why are you still considering Syria to be a threat? Sending a message to everyone in the region, but then there was another message coming from the UN ambassador, a very important figure of the Israel ambassador to the UN, saying that no, it's Egypt, it's a problem too. Alongside the recent tensions that are happening between Israel and Egypt and Egypt and the United States as well. Egypt is facing lots of pressure from the United States to open the borders and get the Palestinians in, although the Palestinians sent clear signals that they're not going anywhere. Is that a genuine attempt from the Trump administration, or is it a move up until he meets with Netanyahu to convince him to go to phase 2 and then start, taking a step back? We're going to have to see after he meets with Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday, what would be the steps that he's going to take after that. These things are very important. However, the fact that the Israeli new IDF Chief of Staff is saying that 2025 will be a year of war, we're preparing, and we are in an arms race, and Iran, Gaza, Beirut, Damascus, everyone, all of that is signaling these people are not really interested in peace in general. Yes, they will be forced to have a ceasefire here and there. They'll have an administration in the US that doesn't always see everything eye to eye when it comes to the regional situation, because the United States at the end of the day might have different preferences. However, Israel is an entity of terror, and they will continue to be so. And that's what's being clarified by the Israeli new IDF Chief of Staff. Moving on to the ceasefire talks. The Qatari Prime Minister is saying, hey, everyone, we need to immediately begin talks about phase 2 of the ceasefire. The negotiation said, when we get to day 16 in the ceasefire, that means we need to go and start talking about phase 2. And now he's a little bit concerned. It hasn't started yet. Why it hasn't started yet? It's because Israel didn't send a delegation. Hamas, they said, we're implementing everything with full force, no complaints whatsoever. But Israel is delaying sending the delegation to Qatar, and Qatar is starting to get worried. They had this report saying, we demand immediate engagement as stipulated in the agreement. Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani said in a conference that he had with the Turkish foreign minister in the capital of Qatar. So the agreement clearly states that they need to move on with the talks about phase 2 so that they can get to phase 2. If the same agreement is built upon the proposal of Joe Biden, that means we'll still have a ceasefire up until we have a phase 2, even if phase 2 hasn't been concluded or both parties haven't agreed on everything to do with phase 2. In phase 1, Israel is still delaying. Right? Israel is still delaying. Why are they delaying? Well, it's coinciding with Benjamin Netanyahu going to the United States. Netanyahu delays sending negotiation team to Qatar ahead of Trump meeting. Why is he delaying the delegation sending to Qatar up until he meets with Donald Trump? Well, he doesn't want to show that I'm engaging with anything up until he gets some nice promises from the United States administration. And this is what explains the attempts of Donald Trump to have more force on Egypt and more force on Jordan and try and get something out of it when it comes to Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu, he officially is delaying all of this. And this report here on some news outlets said that Netanyahu prefers to delay any action until after his meeting, citing an unnamed senior Israeli official. Trump will begin the visit to the U.S. on Sunday. Now he's there already. Reports said he's going to meet with the envoy, Steve Witkoff, tomorrow. And then he's going to meet with Donald Trump after that. He's also going to meet senior figures in the U.S. establishment as well during his trip. He is most likely delaying all of that to try and get something from Steve Witkoff, from Donald Trump, and from the administration as well. From his perspective, I was pressured into a ceasefire that I didn't want. Now I'm going to try and see what the U.S. can give me as well. Now, Steve Witkoff and Trump, both of them, said that we need to move on with phase 2. Trump said if you won't move on to phase 2 of the ceasefire, there's going to be lots of problems. What does Trump mean, lots of problems? Does he still mean the hell that he was speaking about? Because if Israel breaches the ceasefire, that means hell, doesn't it? By Trump's definition, if we won't reach an agreement, or if the hostages won't return, there will be hell. Well, they haven't returned all of them. Who returned? Just a few? These are not all of the numbers. Still talking about a fraction. There's the vast majority are still in Gaza. And the Palestinian resistance is doing that for a reason. They know who they deal with. They don't deal with a trustworthy side, neither when it comes to Israel, nor when it comes to the United States. So whichever administration. However, we did have an administration that did apply pressure on Israel, and they forced them to reach a ceasefire. So with this enforcement of the ceasefire, if Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't go down the same path that Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff ordered him to continue, that means he's going to be breaching it. Will Donald Trump actually raise hell? What will happen? And is that linked to the statement that came from the new IDF Chief of Staff that we are going to have to rely on ourselves, we're going to have to manufacture our own weapons? After several Israeli leaders, by the way, said that, Netanyahu said that, Gallant said that before during this war, after the United States started to use it as slight leverage when it comes to Israel's genocide in Gaza. Of course, not to prevent a genocide, but to apply some sort of pressure so that Israel can play ball with some of the US demands too. At the end of the day, it was the United States' ultimate responsibility for the genocide in Gaza because they supported Israel with whatever they need. When it comes to any delays, any disagreements here and there, these were very minor things. They were not to do with the strategic outlook of the United States to its relationship with Israel. However, did Donald Trump or did Steve Witkoff during his conversation that he had with Benjamin Netanyahu when he forced him to get into the ceasefire, did they say what that hell might mean? Did they say we would, for example, stop something delivered to you? Did they say that we wouldn't really do anything to help you if you're attacked by a really hostile country like Iran? What did they tell them exactly? We need to try and understand, because all of the things that are published are limited. So we need to try and dig and understand, what do they mean by that? What does the US mean by hell to Israel if you don't continue with the ceasefire? They're still giving them weapons. Is it stopping the weapons? Is it not helping Israel prevent an attack? Is it helping another side? And how would we know? How would we know exactly? But clearly, the IDF Chief of Staff is saying, no, we can't actually rely on anyone. Okay. All of that will be clarified further in the next few days. Israel had delays before. Israel had delays during the ceasefire. Israel had slight breaches in the ceasefire. And when we say slight in comparison to the everyday mass killings that they used to do, every breach is a breach at the end of the day, or in comparison to the Lebanese ceasefire. However, this will be clearer towards the end of the week, after Netanyahu has this meeting with Trump, the statements that would follow that might still be intense, because don't forget, things don't change 180 degrees all of a sudden. Like if Trump wants to change a tone, for example, and he has before, or Netanyahu, it wouldn't be so quickly. You're going to give it a few days, try and still apply a leverage, because he's still trying to apply pressure on Egypt, primarily to deal with the situation and force the expulsion of the Palestinian people, which leads us to the statements that came not from an analyst in Israel, not from an ex-figure in the Israeli military intelligence directorate, nor a resigned or retired military official or a politician, an acting ambassador to the UN. The Israeli UN ambassador, Dani Danon, is saying, no, guys, it's Egypt who wants a war with us. Saying that Egypt's training for one purpose only, war with Israel. We have a peace treaty with them, but why are they having so much buildup of arms? They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on modern military equipment every year, yet they have no threats on their borders. Why do they need all of these submarines and tanks? After October the 7th, alarm bells should be raised. We have learned our lesson. We must monitor Egypt closely and prepare for every scenario. Acting. This is not, and also he's not Smotrich, for example, right? If people want to say, okay, radical. No. This is a proper Israeli establishment. And this man's position dictates that he has to be very careful with every statement that he makes in relation to countries globally. He's not like a rogue member of the Knesset or the coalition. No, he's Israeli establishment, this man. This report in All Israel News also said, unlike the Iranian and Syrian militaries that largely rely on outdated Russian military systems, Egypt has, after its peace agreement with Israel, acquired a large quantity of advanced American Western military equipment. Egypt has emerged as one of the strongest military powers in the Middle East. We, according to Dani Danon, we need to ask the United States, why does Egypt require all of this equipment? Why do they need that? F-16s, advanced Abrams tanks, 1.3 billion in aid, Rafale fighter jets from France. Why do they need all of this? Who are they going to fight with exactly? And Egypt also signed a sales deal to get Su-35s from Russia that the US said they would sanction under one of their sanction clauses against any country that they consider hostile if they sell weapons to Egypt. Then Egypt delayed it, later it was cancelled, and the deal moved to Iran, by the way. Reports confirm that Su-35s are already in Iran, by the way. However, even with the lack of the Su-35s, they have an advanced army. And from Danone's perspective, he's saying, no, they're training to fight us. We need to be prepared here. Now, continuing from that, a diplomatic correspondent called Tamir Murag in Israeli Channel 14, he was warning about this massive military buildup, as he called it, placing it in a wider context. According to the report, said Egypt, the largest Arab state with approximately 117 million residents, cannot feed, house, or provide for its population, yet this does not stop them from building in recent years a massive army, a powerful navy, and an air force capable of challenging and complicating matters for Israeli Air Force. He mentioned F-16s, Su-35s, although they don't have them technically. No reports confirm they have them. MiG-29s, Mirage 2000s, and Dassault Rafales. This entire military force, according to him, which repeatedly violates and erodes the Camp David Accords, trains for one purpose only: a war with Israel. So, not just Dani Danon, who is a representative of Israel globally in the world. The Israel ambassador to the UN, that's a position of someone dealing with all countries across the world. And he knows how sensitive the situation is. Then this correspondent elaborating, saying they're preparing for war with Israel. Add to that, of course, the statements of Smotrich of them being responsible for the 7th of October for channeling weapons to Hamas, and the previous senior figure in the military intelligence directorate in Israel saying that they're preparing for attack tunnels against us in Sinai, and they breached every line in the Camp David Accords. They're preparing for war with us. None of that is wrong, by the way. Everything is true. However, why are they escalating this now? Why are they raising the tones with Egypt now? It's to apply pressure on Egypt, because Egypt is under pressure again from Trump and from Israel to open the borders and ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, therefore eliminating any prospect of a Palestinian state, and even potentially giving a massive blow to the Palestinian cause in general. Ethnic cleansing. Of course, they won't raise as a whole, but if you ethnically cleanse the population, if you have forced expulsion, Israel had forced expulsion in 1948 and 1967. These people did not return to their lands. So if they go out from Gaza, and even the Egyptian president said that too as well, they don't return. And we won't be part of the elimination of the Palestinian cause. That's the Egyptian president himself, an ally of the United States, who receives military aid from the US. Now, Donald Trump is still, though, despite all of these statements, is putting on an act. He's still putting on an act. And the reason that I say it's an act is because it's primarily there before he meets with Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's not only a give and give between US and Israel. So if let's say the US applies pressure, you're still talking about a Zionist lobby. What Trump received over $200 million from the Zionist lobby. There's no denying that. All of his constant comments of supporting Israel and demonizing the Palestinian side, talks of deporting Palestine supporters, abhorrent statements and propositions to do with ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people even altogether, right? All of these statements are abhorrent, and they're there because he's linked with the Zionist lobby. So he's trying to find a balance here. Question is, though, how far will they go? There are two ways moving forward with the case of Egypt, by the way. Either they apply pressure and then stop talking about it too much, but try and continue to do it, like the Biden administration. Let us not forget that the Biden administration heavily tried repeatedly as well to convince Egypt to open the borders alongside other Western countries too. They tried to lure Egypt. They offered billions and they offered taking off the debts, other stuff they offered to Egypt, but they, after a while, it faded. But the attempts continued from the Biden administration, although they declared as much. They weren't spoken about in the media. And by the way, some reports said towards the end of the Biden administration, Egypt was offered something in the hundreds of billions, right? Because initially they said 20 billion, 30 billion, take off the debt, and then they said the number turned to 6. But Egypt knows what's prepared, and they know that's dealing with an Egyptian matters. Therefore, they rejected, and therefore they reject it again now. Will Donald Trump do the same thing that Biden did? Initially start with these massive statements and act like, we're definitely going ahead with it, and then slightly fade away, maybe continue and try to lobby to apply pressure here and there? Or will they keep it on the forefront and support Israel fully when it comes to the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population? Well, it could go two ways. However, the second option is more likely. For me, for one primary reason. It's because we are still in a ceasefire. If Donald Trump is very interested in a ceasefire, he will continue to act like he wants to deport all of the Palestinians of Gaza. Whether or not he genuinely wants to, I don't care about that. But the fact of the matter is, he's actually saying it. He will continue to say that I want to deport the people of Gaza so that he can still keep the hope up with Benjamin Netanyahu. If he goes a step too far and tries to apply more sanctions, for example, not more, any sanctions on Egypt, things like taking off that, he might be breaking all of the tools with Egypt, who will finally reach a stage of feeling totally liberated from this US pressure. They've been trying to keep things okay and balance between having this relation and getting this aid with getting diversification and having relations with other countries too. Clearly, the United States wants to have a level of dictating when it comes to that. And the Egyptian side always complained also to the US. They never give them the same things that are equivalent to Israel. They always ensure that Israel has the highest tech, the most advanced fighter jets, for example. Everything in Israel needs to be superior to what the Egyptians have. So Egypt could feel liberated. That could be a blow to the United States foreign policy. However, the United States can make that mistake because they're led by arrogant leaders who are in denial about the collapse of their empire and the rise of a multipolar world. Or Donald Trump can continue talking for the sake of talking, trying to apply pressure, trying to extract something in the hope that he might get something, even if it's a little bit symbolic, which is not very likely. Even anything symbolic is not very likely, purely because it's something that goes against the will of the Palestinian people. And Lord knows the will of the Palestinian people has been proven to the whole world for the past 15 months. These people faced brutal genocide, mass terror and murder by a terrorist entity supported by a bigger terrorist entity and other terrorist and genocide supporters too. They survived all of that, and they rose up with their heads high. They kept their heads held high, proud, returning to destruction, everything, building a tent and living there. Now, there are many things to still apply pressure on the Palestinian population, by the way, for example, like the delay of sending aid to the north or tents or whatever it is, temporary housing, the delay of rebuilding or doing any construction in the north. All of these things might add pressure. However, it wouldn't be anywhere near what these people felt in the past 15 months. We're likely to see tensions with that issue, not only for a few days or a few weeks. In my opinion, it might take several weeks or potentially several months up until the ceasefire is concluded. That is, unless Benjamin Netanyahu decides not to continue with phase 2 of the ceasefire. He hasn't sent his delegation yet. There's a limited time, and come up with any excuse to explode everything to do with the ceasefire and continue with the war, whether at this stage or with a lower intensity, more attacks here and there, simply to keep his coalition, now that he has a more allied IDF Chief of Staff, because the new Chief of Staff in Israel, Zamir, is considered to be a favorite to the government and to the right wing in Israel. One of the people who support him in the government is Smotrich. Smotrich supports him very much, and he was also a figure, Smotrich, who applied pressure on the previous IDF Chief of Staff to resign. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this live stream. Now I'll open the space up for the community, and welcome everyone for another live stream. And thank you very much for tuning in for another show. Janice Wolfgang, Glenn Huxley, thank you, both of you. Janice is saying, can the Zionist economy allow the war? It's not the economy, it's the financial aid and support. The Israeli economy is not in a good state. It has been, Israel has been downgraded twice by Moody's, which is the world's most credible rating agency when it comes to states, with a negative projection for the future twice, one level above not investment worthy. There's a risk that it can be downgraded to that level. Many of Israel's billionaires withdrew all of their money from Israel. Over 1,000 people signed a letter to the Israeli prime minister during the genocide. That is, don't forget, some of them applied pressure during the judicial reform the year before too. But during the genocide, they said that we need to stop this now. The situation is catastrophical. Otherwise, we're going to withdraw our money from Israel. You're talking about Israeli businessmen, Israeli tycoons who have a lot in the Israeli economy. And guess what they did? They withdrew all of their money. They took it away from Israel. They put it in other more investment-worthy places. So the people of the country itself don't have faith in it. Therefore, the Israeli economy is in a very bad state. For the first time, they had to dig into the national reserves, downgraded twice, billionaires leaving, population leaving, all of the losses economically with siege and embargo from the Ansarullah in Yemen, alongside all of the effects of the war. We're not talking even about the military financial losses too. We're just talking about the Israeli economy and everything related to it. So the thing that helps them is the U.S. support. That's the thing here. You need to understand, Israel is nothing without the U.S. The U.S. sends them the money, they send them the arms, and Israel has multi-billionaire backers as a state. It was built by wealthy families. Israel was nothing without them. And they still have people to fund them and to donate and send in very important figures and in very important political and decision-making figures. So that's what keeps them afloat. And I think they will continue to do so long as some people still believe in that concept. As little as they are, you know. Bujar Mahmoud, Trump was just utilized with the ceasefire to save Israel's face because Iran was about to launch the final blow. Trump would have never stopped without an imminent existential threat. Interesting input, and that could be the case. And if that is the case, that means then, well, they should continue with the ceasefire. Why? Because if they stop the ceasefire, they do decide to escalate, well, Iran's threat is still there, isn't it? Ansarullah will become active again, no problem. They closed the Red Sea, they'll close it again. They expelled 3 US aircraft carriers. So all of that is important. However, today we saw something in Lebanon that indicates some sort of confidence from Hezbollah that perhaps we are working towards something that will actually end the hostilities, because today their Secretary General declared the funeral ceremony date of the late Secretary General Nasrallah and Safiuddin on February the 23rd, which is supposed to be just a week after February the 18th, which is the date up until the withdrawal of Israel from Lebanon was extended to. So are they confident? Are they not? Again, no, time will reveal. However, what's for sure is that these latest moves coming from Trump and the statements coming from Israel are an escalation. So it's very important, of course, observe them and take them seriously, because you're talking about the two sides who waged this genocide, United States and Israel, of course. And Jack is saying, well, Mahmoud, I think it's all set up. As soon as Israel gets all the hostages, BBS said, the war will go on. The thing is, Israel will not be getting all of the hostages up until they're completely out of Gaza. That's something that the Israeli, a senior member of the delegation told one of the family members of the prisoners of war in Gaza. And that Israel, by the way, will never retrieve some of the Israelis they killed in Gaza during the genocide, because many of them would be under the rubble, and some of these bodies will never be retrieved. It's people are not going to start digging everything to find bodies. They're just going to be declared either missing or missing and dead. But he has an option to continue the war. But if Trump was serious indeed, and he showed seriousness when he forced them to go into a ceasefire, if he was serious to continue the ceasefire, he can still force him to go ahead with phase 2 as well. Tshikoma, Salama here, there's mercenaries in Gaza. What are they doing there? They're as part of an Egyptian company that is supposed to secure the moving of people from the southern part of Gaza to the north through the previously occupied Netzarim corridor that Israel established and said it will never be withdrawing from, by the way, and they withdrew from it too. And now they withdrew from the Rafah crossing as well. And they work under this Egyptian company. And they're not like fighting anything, they're checking people. They're armed, of course, private companies. They get paid between $1,000 to $10,000 a day for a specific period of time. Now, the thing is, with some of these details to do with timings and what have you, not a lot of details have been published, by the way. But what we do know is that it was in coordination with the Palestinian resistance. It wasn't like they're imposing themselves or anything. I mean, the main reason that happened, really, although the main initiative and the main actions are being taken by the Egyptian forces inside of Gaza, who come in with people and check cars with no arms or anything, by the way, very kind and very nice with the people, is to, of course, take away any tensions. If, like, the genocide, child killing murderers would be checking the people, that's not something that wouldn't be acceptable by the Palestinians. And you're talking about the country that was slaughtering them up until now. TMZBG, did Hezi prepared for war with Israel once the ceasefire is ended? And has Hamas said anything about preparing in case something happens? Well, Hezbollah, I think they're prepared, absolutely. Despite the blows that they go to the assassination of their leaders, they replaced their leaders fairly quickly. Like Hamas replaced leaders fairly quickly. They said we didn't have an hour of gap, Hamas. In the case of Hezbollah, it was evident. And also, on the ground, nothing has affected their capability to attack the heart of the genocide entity up until one day before the ceasefire began, which means that they are prepared and they can continue. They probably don't prefer to do that now, hence why they accepted the ceasefire, hence why they were also quiet about certain breaches. However, in terms of capabilities of fighting Israel, no, they can do that very well. And there will also be an increased threat of an Iranian attack that would be a much bigger blow than before, because of what is perceived to be, again, it's a matter of perception, a weaker position of Hezbollah, either politically or geopolitically in Lebanon. And Iran says and does at the end of the day. And they have proven that they say and do. No without calculation, no without long-term vision. But at the end of the day, the only country in its entirety, as in its form of an official country, because Hezbollah is a movement in Lebanon, Ansarullah is a movement in Yemen, or the official side of a part of Yemen at the end of the day. We can say Yemen, but in comparison to the whole thing, Iran attacked Israel twice. And they attacked Israel very heavily. And a third attack will be bigger than the previous two attacks, most likely, based on the pattern that we saw. I think if Israel decides to escalate with Hezbollah, and even if they decide to escalate with Gaza, by the way, they will be risking lethal blows. They will be risking very, very lethal blows. And guess what? Trump is not going to help them fight Iran. I don't think he will. Biden himself, they did not go ahead and fight Iran with Israel. Yeah, they helped them with everything and supported and whatever, but they did not fight with them. Amber Jones is saying the US are threatening to deport student protests against the IDF and Israeli government. I feel this is only the start against any of us, against Zionism or for Palestine, but we'll keep pushing. Absolutely, people need to keep pushing, because most of these moves are scare tactics by the government, by the way. The government uses state-sponsored terrorism against its own population to intimidate them from supporting causes that they don't like. Didn't you ask yourself once, how comes you can actually fundraise for the IDF and be labeled for supporting the Palestinian cause? Has anyone raised that question before? You can go and support supremacy. You can support Zionist supremacy in Palestine and support their army slaughtering children, committing a genocide, but you can't say one good word about the Palestinian cause. That's a big RIP on anything called human rights and democracy in the West, by the way. And it's a scare tactic at the end of the day. However, people are not really submitting to that. But the fact that it's actually said is enough of a condemnation to anyone who says it, whether it's Trump in the US or anyone else in other countries too. A lot of media says Hezbollah has been decimated. Any media that says Hezbollah has been decimated, it's their brains that have been decimated. The new president seems anti-Hezbollah. What, in America? No one is asking about him anyway. Will Hezbollah be back? They're there. They didn't go anywhere. I was surprised by the lack of response when Israel didn't withdraw. Again, that was a tactic used by Hezbollah, and that has proven to be effective, because the people of the south of Lebanon, the brave people of the south of Lebanon, the community that is a resistance in its entirety, they expelled Israel from 12 villages that the child-killing forces invaded in South Lebanon. So clearly Hezbollah know what they're doing. They haven't gone anywhere. And like I said, there's a lot of propaganda against Hezbollah as a resistance, and of course the Palestinian resistance and what have you. There's a lot of propaganda against them. At the end of the day, they were the ones who stood up for the Palestinians, right? Who stood up in that region? Few. Hezbollah was one of them. Guess what? Hezbollah and the Lebanese people, by the way, they sacrificed the most outside of Palestine for Gaza in terms of people. Approximately 5,000 martyrs. Some of them, of course, large numbers from the resistance, they sacrificed too. But the population, innocent civilians at the end of the day. So they haven't gone anywhere, really. Gully Borg, Mahmoud, is an Egyptian invasion to occupy Palestine possible? Yes, of course it is. Just can't see the IOF facing another army. No, they're good in facing children and infants and newborns and women and buildings from fighter jets. They're cowards. They don't have guts, these people. Every time they see a Palestinian fighter in front of them, they run away. They piss their pants. That's why they wear diapers. That's why people call them the diaper army. Let alone being faced with an army of people who are like disciplined and well-equipped and what have you. They're nothing. They're a paper tiger fighting against civilians. That has been evident in Gaza, hasn't it? Where did these thousands of fighters come up and pop up from all of a sudden in Gaza? Clearly shows who these people were fighting. They were fighting the houses, the hospitals, the orphanages, the schools housing children and women, ITU units, prenatal units in hospitals, pharmacies, bakeries, water wells, destroying the sewer system. All of Gaza's universities have been completely destroyed. All of the schools, tents, burning people alive. This is what they do. Facing fight, and from airplanes, by the way. It's like what? The people on the ground, we saw what they were doing. They were going and taking snapshots and videos of them wearing women's underwear or playing with a 3-year-old's bicycle, or burning it, or stealing whatever they can from these houses, or destroying houses and laughing about it on TikTok. This is not an army. These are, I mean, if there is anything close to like rock bottom of humanity, if they're even entitled to be called anything near that, really, it would be what we saw and the people who committed it and supported it for the past 15 months. That has been evident to the whole world. But fighting people, fighting men, no, that's not that. No way. And Egypt is able. Of course, Egypt is capable. Tory Jones saying, Mahmoud, for the future, there will certainly external countries involved to secure borders to go in with ground troops. Who would these be most likely? If anything of the sort would be agreed upon, it would most likely be United Nations, really. The identity of countries from the United Nations, that's negotiable. Those would be countries that, need to be agreed upon. However, even that on its own can't really prevent this genocide state from committing crimes. Israel, how many UN staff did they kill in Gaza and in Lebanon and Syria and what have you? Banning UN organizations like the UNRWA. But it would most likely be the United Nations. And Alan, thank you so much as well. Alan Marwin, for your super, and also John S as well. Thank you very much for that. And also Pete DeSalvo as well. Let's go to your next. So I was talking about Jimmy Eyes, I hear that Erdogan and Qatar leaders are meeting with Hamas leadership. Any info? These are regular meetings. Hamas, they have an office. Their main political office is in Qatar, and much of their political leadership was present in, some of their members too, in Turkey. And Turkey is also playing a role that isn't visible to everyone publicly when it comes to the ceasefire, especially after Hamas asked for them to be guarantors alongside Russia and China too. And Mahib, thank you as well. That was from Jimmy Eyes. Jimmy also saying, any info about the defense agreement between Iran and Russia? Well, yeah, of course, I can share a few things with you. Well, first, they didn't call it a defense agreement. They called it a strategic agreement. It was reported to be a defense pact before. They didn't call it a defense pact. And I think it was most likely a defense pact in everything apart from the name, because it spoke about strategic ties, it spoke about economic ties, political ties, diplomatic ties, strengthening relations with other countries too, and defense and security and army as well. They didn't call it a defense pact as well, though. However, the past 3 years showed unprecedented coordination between Russia and Iran, both in the war in Ukraine and also with the Russian support for Iran before Iran attacked Israel in True Promise 2. Now, that is very significant, and that put both countries in a stronger position, because Iran is now probably the biggest player in the region. They proved that they can do lots of things that will not only affect countries they don't like, but they can affect things globally if they want, by the way. So very interesting agreement was that took the relations between them to the next level. And based on their coordination, this is the important bit, based on their coordination the past 3 years, that they have this strategic agreement to intensify things further when it comes to ties, that only indicates that stronger ties and stronger coordination between the two countries is happening. Iran already has some of the most advanced air defense systems from Russia. They already have very sophisticated radars from the equipment. The reports confirm that they have the Su-35s too. Top stuff. Likewise, Russia receives some of the finest things they need from Iran too. All of that sends messages in the region. But no, they haven't made any statements about True Promise 3. I think they're seeing the pattern and they're giving it time. Amber, also rumors they're going to reopen Guantanamo Bay for illegal immigrants, and many think this is just the beginning. I mean, for anyone who sees what the United States government does and cannot see that this is the most corrupt dystopia on earth when it comes to what they do, I think they're blind. Guantanamo, choosing this island to not fall under US legislation so they can torture people to death. They've imprisoned people for 2 decades in Guantanamo without any evidence, any proof, no nothing, despite promises that they're going to close it. Innocent people are still in Guantanamo without any evidence, nothing, without access to fair trials, without access to seeing people. And the people who were released from Guantanamo, well, they said what they faced in Guantanamo. All it takes for you is to go and read up about some of the people who left Guantanamo and what they had to say. The internet is full of these things. The fact that Trump is planning to, by the way, it hasn't been closed. I'm not sure why it says reopen, by the way. Deport and send people in. Shows you the state of this man. By the way, technically, he would be an illegal immigrant, wouldn't he? Wasn't this originally for Native Americans, right? Is he going to put himself in Guantanamo? Stephen Kelly, will Iran threaten Israel over the second stage of the ceasefire? I think if Israel decides to go and breach the ceasefire, and if they decide to restart the war, and I'm talking about this, restart the war, I think Iran will make certain statements or have certain moves that would be followed by action if the breach continues, which wouldn't take too long, by the way. I do not think if Israel breaches the ceasefire and starts escalating things further, and then there's a US partner completely supporting them, I think Iran will have something done, and it will have something done fairly quickly. Iran plans Palestinian groups worried about the ICJ decision in South Africa because the Uganda pro-Israel took over as director of the court. Well, there were proofs now, weren't they, about plagiarism against her. It's already out. This has been exposed. Plagiarism, cheating, fakery, bribes, blackmailing, pedophile networks. This is how they operate. This is how your countries operate if you live in the United States or in Israel. That's how it works. Blackmailing, threatening. Worse than any crime movie you've ever watched. TMZBG, has Russia or China made any statements about how they would support Iran if anything happens? It wouldn't be smart to say how they would support them. However, what's for sure is there will be support. How, where, to what level, all of that would depend on the scale of the attack. So now both Iran and Russia understand that Iran is not really under imminent threat. The United States is not showing any interest in attacking Iran. Neither Biden did, nor Trump does. And from their perspective, that's the main thing. China and Russia, they don't worry about Israel. They see Israel as a small arm of the United States planted in the region. The small arm, a genocidal colonial supremacist entity of the West planted there. So they view what the US does with it and to how far they support it with. Plus, they see it as, okay, if Israel attacks Iran once, what do I need to go and defend Iran? They can defend themselves. There's no reason for me to. But on the ground, well, China is giving Iran the biggest economic breather and lifeline and oxygen than anyone, buying millions of barrels regularly. The biggest consumer of Iranian oil is China. Russia openly sending military equipment and fighter jets and anti-aircraft systems. Well, what more do they need to do? It's like they're doing everything. However, like if anyone is thinking like them participating with Iran, you're only talking in case the US is entering with its forces and what have you, and Iran is struggling. Because let's be honest, the United States failed against Yemen. Let's not forget that. The United States and Britain were humiliated against Yemen. Yemen expelled 3 US aircraft carriers. What, are they going to do anything with Iran? Please think about it. Think about that for a second. The US with Britain, aka the genocide cartel, they failed against Yemen. What is the US going to do with Iran? What if Iran decides to launch like 1 or 2 or 3,000 missiles and drones on one of the U.S. aircraft carriers all at once? What are they going to do? Take all of them down? No, not going to happen. So the U.S., I'm not sure they want to. I don't think they're interested in attacking Iran. They know the level of Iran and power of Iran, and they know that it leads to China and Russia at the end of the day. And so far, the U.S. has been doing everything to avoid the direct confrontation with Russia and China. Lynn Mahmoud, are Israel seeing the videos of released Palestinian prisoners? No, the majority of them don't, of course. They live in a bubble and they're manipulated by their mainstream media. The Israeli population is the most manipulated population on earth. And if they want to see something that happens against the Palestinian people, they're going to have to go to Arab media or international media, not their own media. And many of them participate in this propaganda. Many in the Israeli population participate in the propaganda. Now, there has been a shift towards the end of the genocide. And of course, there has been a minority speaking up against this since the beginning, but they're totally irrelevant when it comes to decision making in Israel. But the vast majority, no, nothing. They couldn't care less. They support the torturing of the Palestinian people. And the Bloomster is saying, do you think China will offer Egypt and Jordan aid to balance pressure of the U.S. putting on them by withholding it? Totally, absolutely. And that's why the U.S. has been reluctant when it comes to Egypt. And yeah, China can have something. And other countries too. And I think both Egypt and Jordan, I don't think they use their positions, their strategic positions, to the relevant level. When it comes to negotiations, when it comes to leverage that they have, they don't really. But the United States knows that that's the exit, China. And guess what? China signaled also during this genocide that it's willing to play a part in case there's any vacuum. Because the United States, although it's the biggest warmonger on earth, it's the biggest state causing and spreading and supporting terror globally, it's the biggest cause of instability in the world, the United States establishment. They are portraying themselves as the peacemakers. However, China, when the United States and Britain decided to lead the genocide coalition against Yemen for daring to impose an embargo on a child-killing entity, China sent 6 warships to the Red Sea. They sent 6 warships to send a message to everyone that, listen, even if the United States is, taking a different route, we're here and we'll make sure things go well. Look at what China did in Africa after so many colonies withdrew. Supporting infrastructure, they took off 50 billion in debt, likewise with Russia too, and they are willing to play a bigger part in West Asia and North Africa too. And they have already made some important steps, like the 2023 agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That was brokered by China with mediation from Oman. This was very important, by the way. And the way the Chinese view it, well, the Chinese government, is they're genuinely interested in de-escalation. They're genuinely interested in stability, and they're genuinely interested in peace between people. Unlike Western countries who constantly support this genocidal entity and cause havoc and wreak destruction across the world. Of course, not after mass propaganda and mass manipulation of their own people. Like before they went to war with Iraq and Afghanistan, they were thinking, how do we sell the war? So, hey, if we can't find a valid reason, let's fake something up. Oh, guess what? Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. So, China, absolutely, they can fill the gap, and they are able to play a big role. And whether that role of the United States, by the way, remains there for longer or not, China's on the rise anyway. The BRICS is on the rise. Iran is on the rise. The global south is on the rise. The multipolarity is on the way, and the unipolar world is collapsing. And M. Kafour, thank you so much, said, where and when is Hamas printing these huge billboards? Go and ask them, my friend. They have capabilities to do so many things. Lord knows what they do and what they have under the ground, these people. What we do know is that they gave the genocide entity a blow. They defeated. David defeated Goliath. Do you know what? It's smaller than David and bigger than Goliath. That's what happened. So I think printing billboards is not going to be any issue. Anyway, guys, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you very much for M. Kapoor, John S. Thank you so much for your comments. Mahib, Pete, Alan, Glenn, Janice, thank you very much. Everyone who participated, thank you. Of course, apologies if I was unable to reach all of your comments, but appreciate the input. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed, take care, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace.